Hey everyone, hope you're doing great. Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we'll dive into what if Deku and Naruto were brothers. Smash that subscribe button, and be sure to peek at the description below. Let's begin. The explosion was, in Izuku Midoriya's opinion, a little excessive for a Tuesday morning. It rattled the window of their small apartment, sending a tremor through the All Might action figure on his desk and making it nod in heroic agreement. The scent of burnt sugar and cinnamon, a signature combination of his brother's particular brand of mayhem, wafted under his bedroom door. "Rise and shine, little brother!" a voice boomed, full of gravelly enthusiasm. "The world needs hero shinobi, and you can't save it from under your covers." "Believe it," Izuku groaned, pulling his pillow over his head. It was futile. Naruto's energy was a force of nature, a Category 5 hurricane condensed into the form of a spiky-haired, ridiculously loud 12-year-old. A moment later, his door burst open. Naruto Uzumaki stood silhouetted in the doorway, a proud grin splitting his whisker-marked cheeks. He held a spatula like a ceremonial sword. "Breakfast is served. I call it the Rasen Pancake Jutsu." Izuku peeked over his pillow. On the spatula was a blackened, vaguely circular object that looked less like a pancake and more like a meteorite that had survived re-entry. A wisp of smoke curled from its surface. "Naruto, you used a paper bomb to flip it again, didn't you?" Izuku mumbled, his voice thick with sleep. Details. It's the result that counts," Naruto declared, striding into the room and plopping down on the edge of the bed, making it bounce. He was already dressed in his usual orange and black jumpsuit, a worn-out forehead protector with the leaf symbol of their district tied snugly around his brow. He was only a few months older than Izuku, but he carried himself with the boisterous confidence of someone twice his size. It was a confidence Izuku both admired and couldn't comprehend. They were two sides of the same tarnished coin. Sons of the legendary fourth Hokage and pro-hero, Minato Namikaze, the Yellow Flash, a man whose heroic legacy was so vast, it cast a shadow long enough to engulf them both. Their world was a fusion of two distinct powers. Roughly half the population was born with a quirk, an inexplicable genetic superpower that manifested in endless, bizarre ways. The other half possessed the potential to wield chakra, a life force energy that could be molded into incredible techniques, or jutsu. A lucky few, the prodigies, were born with both. An unlucky few, the truly powerless, were born with neither. Izuku Midoriya was one of the unlucky few. No quirk. No discernible chakra reserves. In a society that defined you by your power, he was a blank slate, a zero. A dud, as the other kids called him. A Deku. Useless. Naruto, on the other hand, was an anomaly. He was born without a quirk, but possessed a reservoir of chakra so colossal it was practically immeasurable. It was a chaotic, untamed ocean of energy raging inside him, a direct result of the nine-tailed fox demon that had been sealed within his infant body by their father on the very night he died. That sealing jutsu, Minato's final, desperate act to save the village, had also made Naruto a pariah. A Jinchuriki. The demon brat. Izuku was pitted. Naruto was feared. Both were outcasts. And in that shared isolation, they had forged a bond stronger than any quirk or jutsu. "Come on, Mom's gonna be late for her shift if we don't get a move on," Naruto said, nudging him with the spatula. "And I need you to look over my history notes. I swear, that Iruka-sensei is trying to kill me with dates about the first Hero Shinobi War." Izuku finally sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. His room was a shrine to heroism. Posters of All Might, the undisputed #1 hero, covered every inch of wall space. Below them were older, more faded posters of shinobi legends, the Sannin, the White Fang, and a cherished, framed photo of a smiling, blonde-haired man in a Hokage cloak, their father. Beside his desk, a row of notebooks was stacked neatly. Hero Shinobi Analysis for the Future, Volume 1 through 13. His life's work. His desperate attempt to participate in a world that had told him he had no place in it. 20 minutes later, they were seated at their small kitchen table. Their mother, Inko Midoriya, had managed to salvage a few edible pancakes from Naruto's culinary disaster. She was a small, kind woman with green hair and eyes that perpetually brimmed with a mixture of love and worry. "Now, are you two sure you have everything?" she asked, fussing over Izuku's crooked collar. "Naruto, did you pack extra kunai for target practice?" "Yep," he said through a mouthful of food. "And Izuku, honey, you remembered your notebook, right?" Izuku nodded, a small smile on his face. "Yes, Mom." Inko looked between her two boys, her expression softening. "You have your father's spirit, Naruto," she said, her voice a little wistful. "That same unstoppable energy." She turned to Izuku, gently brushing a stray curl from his forehead. "And you have his kind heart, Izuku. The heart that always wants to help others." The mention of their father hung in the air for a moment. They knew him only through stories, photos, and the heavy weight of his reputation. Naruto idolized his strength, his title as Hokage. Izuku was fascinated by his intellect, his creation of the Rasengan, and the flying Raijin Jutsu, a technique that combined chakra manipulation with a spatial warping quirk that had made him the fastest man alive. Their shared dream was simple, and impossibly grand, to become a hero shinobi team that would not just live up to his legacy, but surpass it. "We gotta go," Naruto announced, jumping up and slinging his bag over his shoulder. "Big day today. I'm gonna nail the clone jutsu, you'll see. And then you'll show me that new analysis you did on Eraserhead." Izuku's eyes lit up. "Oh, it's fascinating. His quirk, Erasure, only works on emitter and transformation type quirks, but I think his capture weapon works on a microthread chakra principle, which is why it's so effective against shinobi types." Naruto just grinned, clapping him on the back. "That's my brother, the genius. Now let's move it." The walk to the Aldera Junior High Academy for Developing Talents was a daily lesson in the tapestry of their world. The main streets of Mizudafu were a chaotic blend of hypermodern MHA architecture and traditional Naruto-esque structures. Sleek maglev trains zipped past buildings with curved, tiled roofs. A vendor sold ramen from a cart next to a digital billboard advertising the latest support gear from Detnerat. A woman with a minor telekinesis quirk floated her groceries home, walking past a man in a flak jacket who was practicing hand signs while waiting for the crosswalk light to change. It was also a daily reminder of their place in it. As they passed the small park, a group of mothers instinctively pulled their children a little closer, their eyes lingering on Naruto with a cold, fearful glint. A whisper, sharp and cruel, reached Izuku's ears. "The demon child." Naruto's sunny disposition flickered. His shoulders tensed, and his fists clenched at his sides. He tried to hide it, to plaster on his usual grin, but Izuku saw the hurt in his eyes. It was a familiar wound, one that never truly healed. Izuku nudged him gently. "Hey, did you see Endeavor's latest approval rating? It dipped another 2 points after he caused all that property damage chasing that gravity quirk villain. His fire-style jutsu is powerful, but his collateral damage calculations are terrible. He's all power, no finesse." Naruto blinked, the dark cloud passing as he was pulled into Izuku's world of analysis. "Yeah. He's a jerk. Dad was way cooler. All zip and bam and the fight was over. No fires." It was their routine. Izuku would use his observations to distract Naruto from the world's hatred, and Naruto would use his unwavering loyalty to shield Izuku from its pity. That shield was tested the moment they stepped onto school grounds. Well, if it isn't the useless brothers." The voice was like gravel and gunpowder. Katsuki Bakugo stood blocking their path, flanked by his usual cronies. Bakugo was the definition of a prodigy. He possessed a devastatingly powerful explosion quirk, and the fine chakra control to use it with tactical precision. He could create focus blasts from his palms like a quirk user or channel that same energy through his feet for shinobi-like bursts of speed. He was talented, arrogant, and cruel in equal measure. "Out of the way, Kakin," Izuku said, trying to step around him. He and Bakugo had been friends once, a lifetime ago, before Bakugo's powers manifested and Izuku's didn't. Bakugo shoved him back. "What did you call me, Deku?" he sneered, his palms beginning to crackle with tiny explosions. The term Deku, which he had coined, was a play on Izuku's name that meant one who can't do anything. "Still dreaming of getting into UA? You're doubly useless. No quirk, no chakra. You're a statistical error." You'd die in the written exam. Leave him alone, Bakugo! Naruto stepped between them, his blue eyes flashing with protective fire. You're just jealous because you know we're gonna be bigger heroes than you'll ever be, Bakugo let out a harsh laugh. You! The demon brat everyone's afraid of? You can't even make a single decent clone. All you've got is a giant battery you can't even use. You're just a freak. The word hung in the air, heavy and poisonous. Naruto's face contorted with rage. Chakra, red and malevolent, began to leak from him, swirling around his feet like a heat haze. The air grew thick and heavy. Bakugo's smirk widened. He loved this. He loved pushing Naruto to the edge. Before Naruto could lunge, Izuku placed a hand on his arm. It's not worth it, Naruto. He's just trying to get a rise out of you. Naruto looked from Bakugo's smug face to Izuku's pleading one. He took a deep, shuddering breath, the red chakra receding like a tide. He gave Bakugo one last venomous glare. Come on, Izuku. Let's go. We don't have time for jerks with anger issues. They walked away, leaving Bakugo fuming behind them. I hate him. Naruto growled under his breath once they were inside. I really, really hate him. I know, Izuku said softly. But fighting him here won't solve anything. We'll prove him wrong. We'll get into UA and we'll show everyone. Naruto looked at him, his anger melting away, replaced by a fierce, unwavering loyalty. Yeah. We will. Together, the day dragged on. In their Hero Shinobi Theory class, the teacher, a man with a minor quirk that let him stretch his fingers, droned on about the application process for the top academies. Now, most of you will be applying to standard hero or shinobi trade schools, he said, shuffling through papers. But I see a few of you have set your sights a little higher. Bakugo, of course, aiming for UA. Hi, the class erupted in whispers of awe. UA was the pinnacle, the place that had produced legends like All Might. And it seems, the Midoriya Uzumaki brothers are also applying. The awe turned to stunned silence, then to derisive laughter. Them? The quirkless one and the demon? Someone snickered. They'd be lucky to get into a regular high school. Izuku shrank in his seat, his face burning with shame. Naruto slammed his hands on his desk and shot to his feet. You got something to say, then say it to my face! He yelled, his voice cracking with fury. Naruto, sit down! The teacher sighed, not even bothering to defend them. Izuku pulled his brother back into his seat, whispering. Please, Naruto. It's okay. It wasn't okay, but it was their reality. The rest of the day, Izuku buried himself in his notebook. He added a new entry, not on a hero, but on Bakugo. Name Katsuki Bakugo. Quirk, explosion. Allows him to secrete a nitroglycerin-like sweat and ignite it at will. Chakra application, excellent control. Can channel explosions through his feet for enhanced mobility. Body flicker variant. Uses focus blasts as a mid-range attack AP shot. Weaknesses, over-reliance on overwhelming force, highly susceptible to psychological taunts. His power is tied to sweat production, so prolonged fights in cold environments could be a disadvantage. Needs to be baited into making a mistake. Muttering under his breath, he filled the page with diagrams and notes. It was his only weapon, his only way of fighting back. Meanwhile, during their practical ninjutsu period, Naruto stood in the training field, facing a line of wooden posts. The task was simple: create 3 stable clones. Okay, you stupid jutsu! You're gonna work this time! He yelled, gathering his energy. He flashed through the hand signs: ram, snake, tiger. Clone jutsu! Poof! A cloud of smoke erupted. When it cleared, a single, pale, sickly-looking clone lay on the ground, twitching. It looked more like a melted candle than a person. It dissolved into smoke a second later. The other students howled with laughter. Pathetic, Uzumaki! The instructor called out. Your chakra control is abysmal. You have the reserves of a Kage but the finesse of a toddler. Again, Naruto's face was a mask of frustration and humiliation. He tried again. And again. And again. Each time, the result was the same. A puff of smoke and a failed, malformed clone. He was pouring a gallon of water into a thimble, and wondering why it was overflowing. His immense power was a curse, too wild and vast for him to shape. He glanced over at the other side of the field, where Bakugo was effortlessly creating explosive clones, a high-level hybrid technique, and using them for sparring practice. He felt a hot surge of envy and anger. He would get it. He had to. For himself, for Izuku, for their dream. The final bell rang, releasing them from their daily torment. As they were packing their bags, Naruto sagged with exhaustion. I don't get it, Izuku. I'm doing the hand signs right. I'm focusing my chakra. Why won't it work? Your output is probably too high, Izuku said, instantly switching into analyst mode. The clone jutsu requires a precise, small amount of chakra to be divided evenly. You're trying to use a fire hose to fill a teacup. Have you tried starting with less energy? Like way less? Just a trickle. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. A trickle? But Iruka-sensei said to use a strong flow. He's teaching the standard method for students with average reserves. Izuku explained, pointing to a diagram in one of his notebooks. Your reserves are anything but average. The standard rules don't apply to you. You have to write your own. A slow grin spread across Naruto's face. You're the smartest person I know, little brother. I'm just good at observing. Izuku mumbled, a blush creeping up his neck. They started their walk home, the weight of the day lifting as they fell into their familiar rhythm. They took a shortcut under a gloomy underpass, the conversation turning back to their shared ambition. When we get into UA, Naruto said, his voice echoing in the tunnel, we're gonna be in a team. The Uzumaki Midoriya duo. They'll call us the Rasen Flash combo or something cool like that. That's a bit of a mouthful, Naruto. Izuku chuckled. Details. The point is, you'll be the brains, I'll be the brawn. You'll figure out the enemy's weakness, and I'll hit M with a giant Rasengan. You have to learn the Rasengan first. I will. It's Dad's jutsu. It's my birthright, Naruto declared, punching the air. Izuku smiled, but a familiar ache settled in his chest. Naruto had a birthright, a legacy of power, even if it was one he struggled with. What did Izuku have? Nothing but a second-hand dream and a pile of notebooks. The question that haunted his every waking moment bubbled to the surface. Naruto, do you really think I can do it? He asked, his voice barely a whisper. Become a hero? Without a quirk, without chakra, can I really stand by your side? Naruto stopped, turning to face him. His expression was dead serious, all traces of his usual goofiness gone. He poked Izuku in the chest. Don't you ever say that, he said, his voice low and intense. Ever. Your brain is a better power than most people's quirks. Your heart is stronger than anyone I know. You saved me from those bullies back when we were kids, remember? You didn't have any powers then, either. You just stood there, shaking, and told them to back off. That's a hero, Izuku. You've always been one. Tears welled in Izuku's eyes. He quickly wiped them away, overwhelmed by his brother's absolute faith. Before he could respond, a grotesque, gurgling sound echoed from behind them. A shadow detached itself from the tunnel wall. A massive, fluid creature made of green, viscous sludge surged from a manhole cover, two huge, manic eyes floating in its semi-solid form. A couple of medium-sized meat shields. The sludge villain gurgled, its voice like mud bubbling. Perfect. I need a place to hide. Before they could react, the villain lunged. It was impossibly fast. Naruto shoved Izuku out of the way, taking the brunt of the assault. The sludge enveloped him, pouring into his mouth and nose, suffocating him. Naruto! Izuku screamed, scrambling backward in terror. Naruto struggled, his arms and legs flailing uselessly within the gelatinous prison. He tried to flare his chakra, but the sludge seemed to smother it, absorbing the energy. He was drowning. Izuku was paralyzed by fear. His mind was screaming at him to run, to hide, to call for help. He was powerless. What could he do? What could a Deku possibly do against a monster like this? Clang! The manhole cover shot off its hinges, sent flying by a gust of wind. A colossal figure landed between Izuku and the villain, his back to the terrified boy. He wore a radiant smile, and two distinct tufts of blonde hair stood up like rabbit ears. Have no fear, you two! The voice boomed, radiating power and hope. For I am here, it was All Might. In the flesh. With a speed that defied logic, he cocked back his fist. Texas smash! He threw a punch that didn't even connect. The sheer air pressure it generated was like a bomb going off in the confined tunnel. The wind ripped the sludge villain to pieces, splattering it across the walls and freeing a gasping, coughing Naruto. The whole encounter lasted less than 5 seconds. Izuku stared, awestruck. All Might, his idol, his god, stood before him, collecting the villain's remains into a soda bottle with practiced ease. Aha! Villain apprehended! He announced, giving them a thumbs up. You boys all right? A nasty encounter, but all's well that ends well. Naruto, having caught his breath, was vibrating with excitement. Whoa! You're even bigger in person! That was awesome! Believe it! Izuku, meanwhile, was fumbling for his notebook, his hands shaking. All Might! See, could you sign my notebook? He stammered, holding it out. Of course, my boy! Anything for a fan! All Might boomed, signing the page with a flourish. He handed it back, gave them a friendly pat on the shoulder, and prepared to leave. Well, I must be off. Justice never sleeps. Wait! Izuku yelled, the question he had been holding in for a decade burning in his throat. He had to know. He had to ask him. In a moment of sheer, fan-driven insanity, as All Might crouched to leap, Izuku grabbed onto his leg. Naruto's eyes went wide. Izuku, what are you doing? Hey! Let go! I love my fans, but this is too much! All Might yelled as he shot into the sky. The wind whipped at Izuku's face as he clung on for dear life. They landed roughly on the roof of a nearby department store. That was a foolish and dangerous stunt, young man! All Might scolded, though he looked more panicked than angry. Suddenly, he began to steam, clutching his side and coughing. All Might? Izuku asked, concerned. In a great cloud of smoke, the mountain of muscle deflated, replaced by a skeletal, hollow-cheeked man who looked like a walking corpse. Blood trickled from the corner of his mouth. Izuku shrieked in horror. You're an imposter! A fake, I assure you, I am All Might. The man sighed, slumping to the ground. He lifted his shirt to reveal a horrific, swirling scar that covered half his torso. A nasty fight 5 years ago did this to me, got my stomach removed. I can only do the hero thing for about 3 hours a day now. The rest of the time, I'm this. Izuku stared, his entire worldview shattering. The symbol of peace was broken. Just then, a frantic scrabbling sound came from the side of the building. Naruto, having used his chakra to run up the wall, pulled himself over the ledge, panting. Izuku! Are you crazy? You could've, whoa! He stopped short, staring at the shrunken hero. What happened to All Might? The hero sighed again, explaining his plight once more. The brothers listened in stunned silence. The symbol of peace was a flickering candle in the wind. Please, All Might said, his voice strained. Don't tell anyone about this. The world needs to believe in an invincible symbol. Izuku nodded numbly. His mind was reeling, but this was his chance. The one person who could give him a real answer, even without a quirk. Izuku began, his voice trembling as tears streamed down his face. Even without chakra, can I become a hero? Can someone like me ever hope to be like you? All Might looked at him, his hollow eyes filled with a deep sadness. He saw the desperation, the raw, unyielding hope in the boy's face. He thought of the dangers, the villains, the sheer brutality of the world he fought in. He couldn't, in good conscience, give him false hope. Heroism is a dangerous profession, kid, he said softly. Without power, you'd just be a liability. You'd get yourself killed. If you want to help people, you could become a police officer or a doctor. They're fine professions. It's not wrong to dream, but you have to be realistic. The words struck Izuku like a physical blow. Realistic. It was the same thing the doctor had told him. The same thing his mother's pitying eyes had said. The same thing Bakugo screamed at him every day. His dream was dead. Before the despair could fully consume him, Naruto stepped in front of Izuku, shielding him. His face was a thundercloud of fury. You're wrong, Naruto said, his voice dangerously quiet. All Might raised an eyebrow. Son, I've been a hero for a long time. I don't care! Naruto shouted, jabbing a finger at the #1 hero. You didn't see him when we were kids. You didn't see him stand up to bullies bigger than him to protect someone else. You don't see him spend every single night studying heroes and villains, filling up notebooks with strategies that could beat guys with powers 10 times his size. He's got more heart and more smarts in his little finger than any of those fakers at our school. He can be a hero. He is a hero. He just needs a chance. All Might stared at the furious, whiskered boy, then at the sobbing, broken one behind him. He saw a fire in Naruto's eyes that reminded him of someone, a fierce, protective loyalty. Suddenly, a loud explosion rocked the city, not far from their building. A plume of black smoke rose into the air. Damn it! All Might cursed, looking at his side. He was out of time. Stay here, you two. Don't get involved. He ran towards the stairs, his frail body moving with surprising speed. Izuku was frozen, All Might's words echoing in his head. Be realistic. He was right. Naruto was just being nice. He was a Deku. Useless. Naruto put a hand on his shoulder. He's wrong, Izuku. Don't you listen to him. But Izuku didn't hear him. He was walking numbly toward the edge of the roof, his feet carrying him toward the chaos. He needed to see it. He needed to see what a real hero did, and what he could never be. Naruto followed, a worried expression on his face. They arrived at a crowded shopping district to a scene of absolute pandemonium. The sludge villain was back. All Might must have dropped the bottle when Izuku had grabbed his leg, and this time, it had a new hostage. A hostage who was struggling violently, setting off explosions that were preventing the other heroes from getting close. It was Bakugo. The heroes on the scene were helpless. Death Arms was strong, but he couldn't get a grip. Kamui Woods was a wood user, a terrible matchup against a liquid foe. The fire from Bakugo's explosions was spreading, making the situation even more dangerous. The crowd murmured in fear. All Might was nowhere to be seen, likely hidden among them, powerless in his weak form. Izuku watched, his mind a torrent of self-loathing. This is my fault, he thought. If I hadn't grabbed onto All Might, he wouldn't have dropped the villain. It's my fault Bakugo is going to die. And then, their eyes met. Across the fiery street, through the swirling sludge, Izuku saw Bakugo's face. He wasn't arrogant anymore. He wasn't angry. He was terrified. His eyes were wide, pleading for help. In that instant, something inside Izuku snapped. His legs, his useless, powerless legs, began to move. He wasn't thinking. He just ran. He burst through the police barricade, ignoring the shouts of the heroes. Izuku! Naruto screamed, his voice a mix of terror and shock. Izuku's mind finally caught up with his body. What am I doing? I'm going to die. I have no plan. But his legs kept moving. He remembered his notebook, page 25. The sludge villain, weaknesses, eyes and solid body parts within the fluid form. He couldn't hurt it, but maybe he could distract it. He swung his yellow backpack off his shoulders and hurled it at the villain's face. A textbook and a metal pencil case struck one of its massive eyes. The villain roared in pain, its grip on Bakugo loosening for a fraction of a second. It was enough. Bakugo managed to gasp for a precious lungful of air. Izuku reached the villain and began clawing desperately at the sludge, trying to dig his friend out. It was like trying to dig through tar. Deku! What the hell are you doing here? Bakugo choked out. I don't know! Izuku cried, tears streaming down his face. My legs just started moving. I couldn't just stand there and watch you die. He looked up at Bakugo, and for the first time in years, he didn't see a bully. He just saw a scared kid. And he managed a wobbly, terrified smile. You looked like you were asking for help. The villain recovered, raising a massive sludge tendril to smash the life out of this insignificant gnat. But before it could fall, a blur of orange shot past Izuku. Naruto, his face a mask of pure, unadulterated rage, had followed him in. He wasn't thinking about strategy. He wasn't thinking about his own safety. He only saw one thing, his brother, his precious little brother, about to be killed. Get away from him! Naruto roared. He threw a handful of kunai that sank uselessly into the sludge. He tried a substitution jutsu, but it fizzled into smoke. His attacks were just as useless as Izuku's. But he didn't stop. He stood in front of Izuku, his arms spread wide, a human shield against the monster. Two powerless boys, standing together against an impossible foe. From the crowd, the skeletal form of Toshinori Yagi watched. He had been telling himself to stay put, that he was out of time, that he couldn't risk revealing his secret. But watching those two boys, the one with no power at all, and the one with too much to control, they both ran in without a second thought. They moved before any of the pros. They embodied the very core of what it meant to be a hero. I really am pathetic, he thought, a surge of shame and adrenaline coursing through him. He began to bulk up, steam pouring off his body. The villain's tendril descended on the brothers. It was over, and then a hand caught it, a massive, muscular hand. All Might stood before them, his body back in its heroic form, shielding them from the blow. He was smiling his signature smile, but there was blood dripping from his mouth. I told you that you have to be realistic, he said, his voice strained but powerful, looking at Izuku. But I see I was wrong. The top heroes all have stories from their school days. Most of them have one thing in common. He gripped the villain's arm, his muscles bulging. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. He looked at Naruto, then at Izuku. He saw the heart of a savior, and the unyielding will of a protector. He saw the legacy of the fourth Hokage, alive and burning brighter than ever in his sons. That's what happened to you both, wasn't it? With a final, desperate roar that shook the entire block, he reared back his fist. Detroit. Smash! The punch connected, and the world became wind and sound. The sludge villain was obliterated, scattered into nothingness by a force that changed the weather, causing rain to fall from the clear blue sky. In the stunned silence that followed, Izuku and Naruto stood, soaked and trembling, in the shadow of the greatest hero in the world. Their lives, and their destinies, were about to change forever. The world returned in a cacophony of sirens and shouting. The manufactured rain from All Might's final punch had stopped, leaving the streets slick and smelling of ozone and wet asphalt. Izuku was on his hands and knees, gasping for air he hadn't realized he'd been holding. Beside him, Naruto was doing the same, his orange jumpsuit singed and soaked. They were both trembling, not from the cold, but from the violent, world-altering adrenaline crash. Heroes were swarming the area now. The flashy pro-hero Kamui Woods was using his lacquer chain prison to help emergency services secure the crumbling storefronts, while Death Arms was directing the stunned crowd away from the scene. Paramedics rushed towards them, their faces a mixture of professional concern and utter bewilderment. 2 kids were in the middle of it, one of them yelled. Check them for injuries. Izuku felt a gentle but firm hand on his shoulder. Son, are you hurt? Can you tell me your name? He could only shake his head, his mind a static-filled television screen. His gaze was fixed on the towering figure of All Might, who was being mobbed by reporters, their cameras flashing like a summer lightning storm. The symbol of peace stood tall, laughing his signature. BWHHA, as he answered their questions, but Izuku saw the slight tremor in his fist and the trickle of blood he quickly wiped from his chin. He was at his limit. Naruto was the first to find his voice. We're okay, he rasped, pushing himself to his feet. He looked over at Katsuki Bakugo, who was being attended to by a separate team. The blonde prodigy was covered in sludge residue, his eyes wide and vacant with shock. When his gaze met Izuku's, it wasn't with his usual burning rage, but with something else, something confused and raw that he quickly hid behind a scowl before turning away. The heroes who had been standing by helplessly now descended upon the brothers. What were you two thinking? Death Arms boomed, his tone less angry than exasperated. That was the most reckless, idiotic stunt I've ever seen. You could have been killed, you're just kids. This is a job for licensed professionals. Kamui Woods added, gesturing with a wooden arm. Izuku flinched under the barrage of criticism. They were right. He was a fool. A powerless, useless Deku who had only made things worse. He felt a familiar, crushing weight of despair settle over him. But Naruto, ever his shield, stepped forward. They were asking for help. he retorted, his voice raw but defiant. You all were just standing there, talking about matchups and waiting for someone else. My brother did something. The heroes were taken aback by his ferocity, unsure how to respond to a 12-year-old who was dressing them down with more conviction than their own sidekicks. Before the argument could escalate, a new voice cut through the tension. That's enough. All Might had broken away from the press. He strode over, his shadow falling over them all. The other heroes immediately straightened up, their lectures dying in their throats. These boys acted, All Might said, his voice carrying an unchallengeable authority. And because they did, a life was saved. Their methods were unorthodox. He gave the brothers a look so sharp it could have cut steel. But their spirit was undeniably heroic. Now leave them to me. I'll see them home. It was a dismissal, not a request. The other pros, humbled and outclassed, could only nod and return to their duties. All Might waited until the paramedics had given the brothers a clean bill of health before turning his full attention to them. His bright, permanent smile didn't reach his eyes. Walk with me, he said, his tone leaving no room for argument. He led them away from the clamor of the main street, down a series of quiet, winding alleyways until they were completely alone, surrounded by the grimy brick walls of forgotten buildings. The moment they were out of the public eye, his smile vanished. That was the height of foolishness, he said, his voice low and serious, all the booming theatricality gone. You are untrained, unlicensed, and in your case, he nodded at Izuku, completely powerless. You threw yourselves into the path of a villain that had a dozen licensed professionals stumped. The villain could have killed you. The hostage, in his panic, could have killed you. The resulting fire could have killed you. Do you understand the sheer, catastrophic stupidity of what you just did? Every word was a hammer blow to Izuku's already shattered confidence. He couldn't look at the hero. He just stared at his own worn-out red shoes, his fists clenched so tight his knuckles were white. Yes, sir, he whispered, his voice cracking. Naruto, however, crossed his arms, his chin jutting out stubbornly. We'd do it again. All Might's gaze snapped to him. And that, young man, is the problem. That reckless abandon, that complete disregard for your own well-being, it's a dangerous trait. He sighed, a long, weary sound that seemed to carry the weight of 1,000 battles. He leaned against the wall, and for a moment, he looked less like a symbol and more like a tired old soldier. Then, the corner of his mouth twitched. A small, almost imperceptible smile, genuine and unforced, broke through his stern facade. But, it was also the bravest thing I've ever seen, he admitted, his voice softening. In the face of overwhelming odds, when everyone else was frozen, you both acted. You, young Midoriya, with nothing but a school bag and a desperate plan. And you, young Uzumaki, with nothing but your own body to use as a shield for your brother. He looked from one boy to the other, his shadowed blue eyes filled with a new light. It wasn't pity or anger. It was appraisal. I have something to tell you both. Something you need to hear. Come with me. He led them into one of the buildings and up a rusty fire escape, the metal groaning under their weight. They emerged onto a flat, windswept rooftop overlooking the city. The sun was beginning to set, painting the skyline in hues of orange, pink, and deep violet. The chaos below seemed a world away. My words to you earlier, on that other roof. All Might began, turning to face Izuku. I was wrong. I was speaking from a place of pragmatism, of caution. I was projecting my own limitations onto you. Izuku's head snapped up, his eyes wide with disbelief. But what you did today, you proved that a hero isn't just about quirks or chakra. It's about action. It's about the heart. Hope, fragile and tentative, began to bloom in Izuku's chest. He had to ask. He had to be sure. His voice was a shaky whisper, filled with the ghost of a dream he thought had died an hour ago. So, even after all that? After I was so stupid, so useless, is there still a chance? See, can I really become a hero shinobi? Before All Might could answer, Naruto stepped forward, his fist clenched, his blue eyes blazing with a conviction that could have rivaled the setting sun. Don't you dare say no! Naruto warned the #1 hero, his voice shaking with raw emotion. Don't you dare tell him he can't. You think being a hero is just about punching things? This guy. He jabbed a thumb at his brother. Has 13 notebooks filled with analysis on every hero and villain he's ever seen. He can tell you the weaknesses of your quirk, the theoretical limits of Endeavor's fire jutsu, and the best way to counter Eraserhead's capture weapon. He sees things nobody else sees. He saved me from the sludge because he was smart, and he saved Bakugo because he was brave. Tears started to well in Naruto's eyes, tears of frustration and fierce, protective love. He's been told he's worthless his whole life by everyone, but he never, ever gave up on his dream. Not once. He wants to save people with a smile, just like you. So don't you stand there and tell him to be realistic. Being a hero isn't supposed to be realistic. It's about doing the impossible, and that's what he did today. Naruto finished his tirade, panting, his chest heaving. The silence that followed was thick and heavy, broken only by the distant city hum. All Might stared, not at Naruto, but at Izuku, who was now openly weeping, completely overwhelmed by his brother's passionate defense. He saw the two of them, the outcast Jinchuriki and the powerless dreamer, standing together against the world. He saw an unbreakable bond, a synergy of heart, and that was more powerful than any quirk he had ever encountered. He saw the future, and in that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of history. You've got a good brother, kid, All Might said softly to Izuku. Then he took a deep breath. He looked Izuku dead in the eye, and the words that came next were the most powerful ones the boy had ever heard. You can become a hero. The 3 words hit Izuku with the force of a Texas smash. The fragile dam of his emotions burst, and he collapsed to his knees, sobbing uncontrollably. It wasn't the sound of sadness, but of a lifetime of pain, ridicule, and repressed hope being washed away in a flood of pure, unadulterated joy. For the first time, his dream wasn't a fantasy, it was a destination. Naruto grinned, wiping his own eyes on his sleeve, and gave his brother a supportive pat on the back. In fact, All Might continued, a strange intensity in his voice. I believe you are the one I've been searching for. Poof! In a sudden, shocking billow of steam, the colossal hero vanished. In his place stood the skeletal, hollow-eyed man from before. Naruto yelped and jumped back, instinctively reaching for a kunai. Whoa! It happened again! Are you sure you're really All Might? Maybe it's a transformation jutsu. This is my true form, kid. Don't worry. Toshinori Yagi sighed, waving a dismissive hand. He looked down at the still sobbing Izuku. Young Midoriya, what you did today was proof that you have the spirit, but you lack the power. Your heart is in the right place, but your body is an empty vessel. Fortunately, I can offer you a solution. He sat down on the ledge, his back to the sunset, and his voice took on a solemn, reverent tone. My quirk is not what it seems. It is not something I was born with. It has a name, one for all. Izuku's sobs quieted as he listened, captivated. Think of it as a sacred torch, passed from one generation to the next. Toshinori explained. One person cultivates the power, then passes it on to another. It is a crystallization of power, a quirk that stockpiles strength, growing more potent with each new user. I am the 8th wielder of One for All. He held up a hand, clenching it into a fist. And I have been looking for a worthy successor. Someone with a true hero's spirit. Someone who moves to save others not for fame or glory, but because it is the right thing to do. Today, I found him. His gaze was locked on Izuku. The air grew still. The world seemed to hold its breath. Young Izuku Midoriya, I have deemed you worthy of my power. I want to give you my quirk. Izuku's brain short-circuited. The logic of his entire life, the fundamental rule that he was quirkless and would always be quirkless, shattered into a million pieces. Giving someone a quirk? Passing it on? It was impossible. It defied science, genetics, everything he had ever learned. And yet, it was All Might saying it. I don't understand. He stammered, his mind unable to process the sheer magnitude of the offer. It is your choice, of course, Toshinori said gently. But it is a chance for your dream to become a reality. The choice was no choice at all. It was the answer to a prayer he had been whispering in the dark since he was 4 years old. Yes, Izuku breathed, the word barely audible. Then, louder, filled with a conviction that mirrored his brother's from moments before. Yes. I'll do it. I accept. Toshinori smiled, a genuine, warm expression that transformed his gaunt features. Good. Your journey will not be easy. It begins now. Then, he turned his attention to Naruto. His expression shifted again, becoming more analytical, more serious. And now for you, young Uzumaki. Naruto, who had been listening with wide-eyed amazement, straightened up. What about me? I don't need anyone's quirk. I've got my own power. Yes, you do, Toshinori said, his voice dropping. I felt it when that villain grabbed you. An immense chaotic energy. A power far greater than your own chakra reserves. Red and filled with rage. It's the same energy I felt leak from you back on the school grounds when you confronted your classmate. Naruto flinched as if struck. He instinctively put a hand over his stomach, where the seal was located. Most people just saw him as a nuisance or a freak. No one had ever identified the nature of the power within him so precisely. I won't ask you what it is, Toshinori continued, his eyes betraying a deep understanding. A hero shinobi is entitled to his secrets, but power like that, untamed and uncontrolled, is as much a danger to you and your allies as it is to your enemies. It's a wild stallion, and right now, you're just barely holding on to the reins. He looked at Naruto, not with fear, but with a profound respect. I cannot give you power. You have more than enough already. And I am not a master of chakra. My expertise lies elsewhere, but I can offer you something just as valuable. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. I can offer you guidance. A teacher. Naruto's brow furrowed in suspicion. A teacher? I've got Iruka-sensei. Iruka is a fine instructor for the basics, Toshinori conceded. But he doesn't understand the kind of power you wield. You need a specialist, a true master, someone who understands unconventional power and the legacy you carry. Someone who knew your father. The world stopped spinning for Naruto. He and Izuku exchanged a shocked glance. People rarely, if ever, spoke of their father to them. He was a revered but distant figure from the history books. To meet someone who actually knew him. Who? Naruto asked, his voice barely a whisper. His name is Kakashi Hatake, Toshinori said. They call him the Copy Ninja. An old comrade in arms and one of the most brilliant shinobi of his generation. Your father trusted him with his life. He is eccentric and perpetually late. But there is no one better suited to teach you how to control the torrent inside you and shape it into a tool for justice. An offer of power for one brother. An offer of control for the other. It was perfect. It was everything they needed. Naruto's heart hammered in his chest. A chance to learn, to grow strong, to finally master the demon that had defined his life. A chance to connect with his father's past. I'll do it, Naruto said, his voice firm, his decision absolute. I'll meet him. I'll learn from him. I'll become so strong, I'll even surpass you one day, believe it! Toshinori let out a hearty laugh, which turned into a hacking cough. I look forward to it, kid. He stood up, looking at the two of them as the last sliver of sun dipped below the horizon, plunging the city into twilight. This is a secret of the highest order, he said, his tone grave. The truth of one for all, the nature of your power, my true form, no one can know. The world is a more fragile place than it seems. The symbol of peace must stand, even if the man behind it is crumbling. And there are villains out there, true monsters, who would do anything to get their hands on powers like yours. Can I trust you both with this burden? Izuku and Naruto looked at each other. They had shared every secret, every joy, and every sorrow their entire lives. This was just one more. The biggest one yet. Together they nodded. Yes, All Might, they said in unison. Good, he said with a final, satisfied nod. Now let's get you home. Your mother must be worried sick. The walk home was a surreal, dreamlike haze. The city lights seemed brighter, the air crisper. Every mundane detail felt charged with a new and profound significance. They were no longer just two outcast boys with an impossible dream. They were the chosen successors, bearers of a secret that could change the world. Izuku was still in a state of shock, his mind replaying All Might's words on a loop. You can become a hero. I will give you my quirk. He kept touching the pocket where his notebook was, the one with All Might's signature, as if to confirm it was all real. He felt a profound sense of whiplash, rocketing from the lowest despair of his life to a height of euphoria he never could have imagined. Tears would well up in his eyes every few minutes, and he'd have to quickly wipe them away. Naruto walked beside him, unusually quiet. He was processing his own revelation. A real teacher. Someone who knew his dad. A path to controlling the Kyuubi. For so long, the power inside him had been a source of fear and shame. Now, for the first time, it felt like a challenge he could actually overcome. It felt like potential. Can you believe it? Naruto finally broke the silence, his voice full of wonder. He chose you, Izuku. He saw what I've always seen. Izuku sniffled, a watery smile spreading across his face. He's helping you too. We're really going to do it, aren't we? We're going to get into UA. We're going to be heroes. Darn right we are, Naruto said, bumping his shoulder. The Rasen Flash combo. I'm telling you, the name's gonna stick. Their apartment building came into view. As they climbed the stairs, the weight of their new reality began to settle in. This was a secret they had to keep, even from the person they loved most in the world. The door flew open before they could even reach for the knob. Inko Midoriya stood there, her face pale, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She had clearly seen the news. Oh, my babies! She cried, pulling them both into a fierce, trembling hug. I was so worried. I saw the explosions, the villain, and they said 2 junior high students were involved. I was so scared. She pulled back, her hands fluttering over them, checking for injuries. Are you hurt? Are you okay? What happened? Izuku and Naruto exchanged a quick, panicked look. This was their first test. We're fine, Mom, Izuku said, trying to sound reassuring. We were just close to the incident. The heroes took care of it. Yeah, Mom, no big deal, Naruto added with a wobbly grin. All Might showed up. It was super cool. He took care of everything. Inko didn't look entirely convinced. She saw the singed edges of Naruto's jumpsuit, the scrapes on Izuku's arms, the profound exhaustion in their eyes. But she also saw that they were safe, and right now, that was all that mattered. Well, alright, she said, hurting them inside. Go wash up. I've made katsudon. You must be starving. That night, dinner was a quiet affair. Inko kept watching them with worried eyes, while the brothers pushed food around their plates, their minds a million miles away. The secret sat between them, a tangible presence at the dinner table. It was the first wall between them and their old life, the first step into their new one. Later, they sat in their shared bedroom. The All Might poster on the wall seemed to be smiling down at them with newfound meaning. Izuku had his notebook open to the signed page, tracing the bold signature with his finger. One for all, he whispered, the name feeling foreign and sacred on his tongue. The power of the #1 hero, in me, and a teacher who knew Dad, Naruto said, lying on his bed and staring at the ceiling. Maybe he can tell me what he was like. You know, for real. They fell silent, each lost in the gravity of his own future. The path ahead was daunting, filled with impossible challenges. For Izuku, it was mastering a power that could tear his body apart. For Naruto, it was taming a demon that could level a village. But for the first time, the path was there. It was real. Naruto rolled over, looking at his brother, who was still staring at the autograph as if it held all the answers in the universe. Hey, Deku, he said softly, using the old, cruel nickname, but this time, it was devoid of any malice. It was just familiar. Yeah? Izuku looked up. Naruto's face was serious. Don't think this means you can slack off on your analysis. I'm still gonna need you to be the brains of the operation. A real, genuine smile bloomed on Izuku's face, reaching his eyes and erasing the last traces of his earlier despair. Don't worry. And you'd better learn that clone jutsu. I'm not going to be able to carry you through every exam. Hey! I'm the older brother. I do the carrying. Naruto shot back, throwing a pillow at him. Izuku laughed, catching it easily. The familiar banter was a comforting anchor in the swirling sea of change. Their dynamic was the same, but the foundation beneath them had shifted forever. They were no longer just the sons of the Flash, living in his shadow. They were no longer just the outcasts of the village, defined by what they lacked. Tonight they were the inheritor of One for All and the student of the Copy Ninja. They were the bearers of a great secret and a greater hope. They were brothers, standing together at the foot of a mountain they now had the tools to climb. Naruto held out his fist. Izuku bumped it without hesitation. Their journey had just begun. The first month was an exercise in futility. A monument to how impossibly far they had to go. For Izuku, his new life began at 5 a.m. at the Dagoba Municipal Beach. It was less a beach and more a landfill that had lost the war with the ocean. A decade of illegal dumping had turned the once pristine coastline into a jagged mountain range of rusted appliances, forgotten furniture, and mountains of plastic refuse, all slowly being reclaimed by the salty tide. It smelled of decay and brine. On that first morning, a transformed All Might stood beside him, looking like a god silhouetted against the pale dawn. He gestured to the metallic wasteland with a grand sweep of his arm. "This, young Midoriya, will be your gym!" he boomed, his voice echoing off a derelict refrigerator. "My quirk, One for All, is a hurricane of pure power. If you tried to inherit it now, your limbs would blow right off your body. We need to turn this vessel of yours." He poked Izuku's soft stomach, making the boy squeak. Into a steel fortress, he produced a comically detailed and color-coded schedule, complete with cartoon All Mights demonstrating various exercises. It was called the American Dream Plan. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to completely clear this section of the beach before the UA entrance exam in 10 months. Izuku's jaw dropped. He stared at the mountain of trash, then back at his own spindly arms. It wasn't a task for a 12-year-old. It was a task for a fleet of industrial demolition vehicles. All of it? That's the goal. A true hero must not only be strong, but must also serve the community. This is hero work, my boy. Restoring this coastline to its former glory. Now, start with this refrigerator. Izuku gripped the edge of the rusted appliance. He pulled. He strained until his face was purple, veins popping in his forehead. The refrigerator didn't budge. It was as if it were fused to the very bedrock of the planet. After a solid minute of fruitless struggle, he collapsed onto the sand, gasping. All Might laughed, a sound like a friendly earthquake. "It's not about lifting with your arms. It's about lifting with your entire body. Squeeze your butt cheeks. Clench your core. Even your toes should be working. Go beyond. Plus ultra." For the next several hours, Izuku did just that. He hauled, he pushed, he dragged. He managed to move a single, waterlogged tire about 20 feet. By the time All Might called it a day, every muscle in Izuku's body was screaming in protest. He felt less like a hero in training and more like a human noodle. Naruto's hell was of a different nature. It was quieter, more insidious, a war waged not against metal, but against a single, infuriatingly delicate leaf. He met his new teacher in a secluded training ground deep in the woods on the outskirts of Muzurifu. He had been expecting a stern, imposing figure, a shinobi legend cloaked in mystique. What he got was a man with gravity-defying silver hair, a mask covering the lower half of his face, and a forehead protector slanted to cover his left eye. He was leaning against a tree, reading a small, orange book with a title that Naruto couldn't quite make out. He hadn't even looked up when Naruto arrived. "You're late," the man said, his visible eye curving into a lazy crescent. His voice was calm, almost bored. "I'm not late. You're just super early." Naruto shot back defensively. Semantics." The man sighed, finally snapping his book shut. "I'm Kakashi Hatake. All Might told me about you. The Jinchuriki son of my sensei." The words were spoken so casually, yet they hit Naruto with immense force. My sensei. This man was his father's student. "You have a problem," Kakashi continued, his tone clinical. "Too much power, not enough control. It's like trying to thread a needle with a fire hose. We're going to start by teaching you how to turn that fire hose into a faucet you can actually control." He plucked a leaf from a nearby bush and placed it on Naruto's forehead. Your task is simple. Focus your chakra to this single point and make the leaf stick. That's it, Naruto blinked. That's it? That's my super secret special training? Sticking a leaf to my head? I thought you were gonna teach me some awesome, killer jutsu. Kakashi's eye crinkled in amusement. Your father, a man hailed as a once-in-a-generation genius, spent a month mastering this exercise. Let's see how you do, Naruto grumbled but did as he was told. He closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and tried to channel his chakra. Whoosh! A gale of pure energy erupted from him, sending the leaf, along with a dozen others, flying into the canopy. Kakashi hadn't even flinched. Too much, he said simply, reopening his book. Try again. Naruto tried again. And again. For hours. He would either produce a hurricane of chakra that blasted the leaf away, or, in his attempt to use a trickle, as Izuku had suggested, produce nothing at all. The leaf would just slide off his forehead and flutter mockingly to the ground. His frustration grew with every failure. This is stupid! It's impossible! He finally yelled, kicking the tree. Kakashi didn't look up from his book. It's fundamental. Without this, you will never master the clone jutsu. You will never master the Rasengan. You will remain a fire hose, spraying destruction and chaos everywhere, unable to hit a single target. Is that the kind of hero shinobi you want to be? The words, though spoken softly, were sharp. Naruto deflated, the anger draining out of him, replaced by a sullen determination. He picked up another leaf. That night the two brothers met at their front door and practically collapsed into each other's arms. Izuku smelled of rust and low tide. Naruto was covered in dirt and twigs. I can't feel my everything. Izuku groaned, his limbs feeling like lead weights. My head is going to explode. Naruto mumbled, rubbing his temples. Leaves, so many leaves. Inko took one look at her battered sons and her face paled with worry. Good heavens! What happened to you two? Did you join some kind of extreme sports club? Something like that. Izuku managed, giving her a weak smile. Yeah, Mom. Naruto chimed in. It's character building. That night set the pattern for the next 2 months. Izuku would wake before dawn and torture his body on the beach, his only reward the slow, agonizing progress of a trash pile shrinking by inches. All Might was a relentless but inspiring taskmaster, pushing him past his limits, shouting encouragement, and occasionally sharing stories of his own training. The body can be pushed further than the mind thinks possible, young Midoriya. The moment you think you're done, that's when the real training begins. Naruto, meanwhile, would spend his afternoons in the quiet forest, waging his silent war against the leaf. Kakashi was a frustratingly hands-off teacher. He would offer cryptic advice. Don't think about the river, think about a single drop of water. Before returning to his book, leaving Naruto to struggle and fail on his own. It was a test of patience, a virtue Naruto possessed in tragically short supply. They would return home each day, broken and exhausted. Their small apartment became their recovery ward. It was there, in the quiet moments between the hell of their training, that their bond became their greatest asset. One evening, Izuku was slumped at the kitchen table, his hand shaking so badly from muscle fatigue he could barely hold his chopsticks. Naruto, despite his own mental exhaustion, wordlessly took the bowl and began feeding him, shoveling rice and fish into his mouth like he was a baby bird. You gotta eat, little brother, Naruto said, his voice firm. All Might's right. A hero's body is a fortress. Fortresses need fuel. Now open up. Another night, Naruto came home in a rage, having failed to make the leaf stick for the 20th day in a row. He kicked off his sandals and punched the wall, a burst of red, malevolent chakra flaring around his fist for a split second, scorching a small black mark on the wallpaper. I can't do it, Izuku. I'm a failure. He thinks I'm a loser, just like everyone else. Izuku, despite the searing pain in his own overworked muscles, got up and retrieved his first aid kit. He gently took his brother's bruised hand and began wrapping it. Then, he grabbed a napkin and a pen. You're thinking about it wrong, Izuku said, his voice soft but clear. You're trying to push the chakra out. Kakashi-sensei wants you to make it circulate. Like a current. Look, he drew a diagram on the napkin, a crude sketch of a human head with arrows showing energy flow. Instead of a straight line from your stomach to your forehead, try to visualize it as a small, gentle whirlpool, right on the surface of your skin. The leaf isn't being held by pressure, it's being held by a current. Naruto stared at the drawing, then at his brother. He didn't fully understand the theory, but the image of a whirlpool clicked something in his mind. The next day, for the first time, the leaf twitched. The grind continued into the 5th month. The seasons began to turn. The early morning chill on the beach was sharper, the leaves in Kakashi's forest turning from green to gold. Progress was slow, but it was tangible. Izuku had cleared a significant corner of the beach. His body was changing. The soft, undefined lines of his youth were hardening into the corded sinew of an athlete. He could now lift a washing machine onto his back and carry it to the disposal truck All Might had arranged. His hands were a mass of calluses, his skin tanned by the sun. He still looked small compared to All Might, but he was no longer fragile. One morning, after hauling a particularly stubborn engine block, Izuku collapsed. I can't do it, All Might," he gasped, his lungs burning. "The exam is 5 months away. The beach is still a mess. I'm not going to make it. I'm not worthy." All Might's smile faded. He knelt beside Izuku, his expression serious. "Worthy? Young Midoriya, worthiness isn't a destination you arrive at. It's a choice you make, every single day. Look." He pointed. Izuku followed his finger and saw, for the first time, a clear patch of sand where the sun was glinting off the gentle waves. A small family was walking there, the children pointing at the cleaner section with wonder. "You've done that," All Might said, his voice filled with pride. "You are already doing the work of a hero. One for all isn't a reward for finishing the job. It's a tool to help you continue it. Now get up. That motorcycle chassis isn't going to move itself." Meanwhile, Naruto had finally conquered the leaf. The day it stuck to his forehead for a full hour, he let out a whoop of triumph so loud it startled a flock of birds from the trees. Kakashi had simply nodded from his perch. "Good. Phase 1 complete. Now for Phase 2. He led Naruto to a colossal, ancient tree that seemed to scrape the sky. "Tree walking," he announced. "The principle is the same, but it requires a constant, precise output of chakra from the soles of your feet to create a surface to stick to. Too little and you slip, too much." He gestured to a series of deep gouges in the bark. "And you blast yourself off. Your goal is to run to the top and back down without using your hands." Naruto's first attempt was predictable. He took a running start, channeled his chakra, and his foot connected with the trunk. Crack! A huge chunk of bark splintered off, and he was thrown backward, landing in a heap. "Right!" Naruto groaned from the ground. "Too much." His subsequent attempts were a series of painful, gravity-assisted failures. He'd make it a few steps, lose focus, and come tumbling down, landing on his head, his back, his pride. Kakashi offered no sympathy, only observation. "Your focus is inconsistent. You're thinking about the top of the tree, not the step you're taking right now. Be present." The bruises and scrapes became a nightly ritual for Izuku to tend to. "He keeps falling," Izuku muttered one night, dabbing antiseptic on a particularly nasty gash on Naruto's arm. "And his chakra output is still spiking." "I know!" Naruto hissed through his teeth. "I'm trying to make it a whirlpool like you said, but for my feet. It's like trying to juggle whirlpools while running up a wall. Maybe it's not a whirlpool." Izuku mused, his analytical mind kicking in. He grabbed the napkin again. For the leaf, it was about surface tension. For this, it's about adhesion. You don't need a current, you need suction. Like an octopus. 1,000 tiny anchor points, all firing in perfect sequence with your steps. Don't think of it as one continuous flow. Think of it as a series of quick, powerful, focused bursts. Stomp. Stick. Stomp. Stick. Naruto's eyes lit up. Tiny octopus feet. I get it. You're a genius, Izuku. The 8th month brought the first signs of a harsh winter, and the first true breakthrough. Izuku, now a lean, mean, trash-hauling machine, had cleared over 2/3 of the beach. The change was so dramatic it had started making local news. People were returning to the shore, walking their dogs, and marveling at the clean sand. Izuku, working under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, remained an anonymous benefactor. His physical strength had skyrocketed, but so had his mental fortitude. The boy who once flinched at his own shadow now faced down a mountain of scrap metal every morning and saw not an obstacle, but a promise. Naruto, after weeks of painful trial and error, finally put Izuku's octopus feet theory into practice. He took a deep breath, focused, and ran at the tree. Stomp. Stick. Stomp. Stick. 1 step. 2. 5. 10. He was running straight up the vertical trunk, defying gravity. He was halfway up before his sheer excitement broke his concentration and he fell. But this time he landed on his feet in a crouch, a massive, triumphant grin on his face. From his branch, Kakashi closed his book. For the first time, Naruto saw both of his teacher's eyes. His uncovered left eye was not a normal eye. It was red, with 3 black tomos swirling around the pupil, the Sharingan. But it wasn't the legendary eye that caught Naruto's attention. It was the look in it. A look of genuine, undisguised pride. "Your father would be proud," Kakashi said, and the simple words of praise meant more to Naruto than 1,000 successful jutsu. "Now do it again. All the way to the top." The boy's progress was not lost on their mother. Inko saw her sons transforming before her eyes. Izuku's quiet demeanor was now underpinned by a wiry strength, a confidence in his own physical presence. Naruto's loud, chaotic energy was being tempered by a newfound focus, a stillness that would occasionally settle over him when he was deep in thought. They still came home exhausted, but it was the satisfying exhaustion of hard work, not the soul-crushing weariness of being an outcast. She also saw the grocery bill. The amount of food 2 superpowered teenagers in training could consume was a force of nature in itself. She cooked mountains of rice, kilos of meat, entire forests of vegetables. It was her way of supporting them, her contribution to their secret, Herculean efforts. The final month. January. The UE exam was a tangible, terrifying deadline on the calendar. The air on the beach was frigid, Izuku's breath pluming in front of him. Naruto's training ground was dusted with snow. The pressure was immense. Izuku made his final push. He worked with a feverish intensity, his movements economical and powerful. The last few tons of refuse, a rusted-out bus, a web of tangled industrial cables, were a monumental challenge. He worked until his fingers bled, until his vision swam with black spots. All Might was there every step, no longer just a coach, but a true mentor, talking to him not about strength, but about responsibility, about the weight and the honor of the power he was about to inherit. Naruto, now able to run up and down the giant tree with ease, had moved on to water walking under Kakashi's tutelage. It was an even finer degree of control, requiring constant adjustments to match the shifting surface of a freezing cold river. He spent most of his time falling in, emerging sputtering and shivering, only to get back on the log he was using as a platform and try again. "It's the final test of control, Naruto," Kakashi explained, not even bothering to feign reading his book anymore. "More difficult than the tree, because the surface is not constant. Life is not a constant. A true hero shinobi must be able to keep his footing, no matter how chaotic the world beneath him becomes." On the morning of the entrance exam, the day before the test itself, it all came to a head. Izuku stood on the edge of the Dagoba beach. It was completely, utterly, breathtakingly clean. The 10 months of accumulated junk were gone. In its place was a vast expanse of pristine, golden sand, meeting the turquoise water in a gentle line of white foam. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting long shadows and painting the sky in glorious shades of orange and pink. He had done it. He climbed onto the roof of a transport truck where All Might was waiting. Izuku let out a primal scream of victory, a sound of pure, unadulterated triumph that he had held in for 10 months. He was shaking, crying, laughing all at once. All Might recorded the moment on his phone, a proud, fatherly smile on his face. "Excellent work, my boy! A truly heroic effort! Look at you!" Izuku looked at his reflection in the phone's screen. The frail, timid boy from 10 months ago was gone. In his place was a young man with hard muscles, a determined jaw, and eyes that shone with an unbreakable will. All might powered down to his skeletal form, his breath misting in the cold. "No," Toshinori Yagi said, his voice soft but filled with a profound gravity. "For your reward." He plucked a single strand of his iconic blonde hair. "You have built a proper vessel. It is time to receive the power." He held out the strand to Izuku. "Eat this," Izuku stared. "Ha! To inherit my power, you have to ingest some of my DNA. This is the quickest way," Toshinori insisted, a slight blush on his gaunt cheeks. Izuku, his mind still reeling from the sheer absurdity of the moment, took the hair. It was the culmination of 10 months of blood, sweat, and tears. It was the key to his dream. With a trembling hand, he put the hair in his mouth and swallowed. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, he felt it. It wasn't a painful explosion. It was a deep, resonant thrum that started in his core and spread through every cell in his body. It felt like a slumbering thunderstorm had woken up in his veins, a feeling of limitless, terrifying, and awe-inspiring power. One for all was his. At that exact moment, miles away, Naruto stood on the surface of the freezing river. He was soaked, his teeth chattering, but his eyes were closed in deep concentration. He took a step. Then another. He walked across the entire width of the river and stepped onto the opposite bank without falling once. He opened his eyes and looked down at his feet, then back across the water. A slow, wide grin spread across his face. Kakashi was waiting for him, holding out a dry towel. "I think you're ready," was all he said. The morning of the exam. The sun rose on a new world. Izuku and Naruto stood before the colossal gates of UA High Academy for Heroic Arts and Ninjutsu. The building was an architectural marvel of glass and steel, a modern fortress where legends were made. A river of hopeful students flowed around them, buzzing with nervous energy. Some were showing off their quirks, others were practicing hand signs. The two brothers were an island of calm in the storm. They were not the same boys who had stood on that rooftop 10 months ago. Izuku's posture was different. He stood taller, his shoulders back, the new power humming beneath his skin like a secret song. Naruto's usual boisterous energy was still there, but it was tempered, focused, his blue eyes holding a new depth and clarity. They were battered, scarred, and more exhausted than they had ever been in their lives, but they were ready. "So," Naruto said, cracking his knuckles. "This is it, this is it," Izuku confirmed, his heart hammering against his ribs, a mixture of terror and exhilaration. The power inside him felt like a wild animal in a cage, rattling the bars. He had the power, but he had no idea how to use it. They looked at each other. They saw the reflection of their shared struggle, the silent understanding of the hell they had endured, and the unwavering hope for the future they were about to build. 10 months of pain and perseverance had forged them into something new. Something stronger. "When this is over, I'll be one step closer to being Hokage, believe it!" Naruto declared, his voice ringing with unshakable confidence. Izuku met his gaze, a genuine, radiant smile on his face. "And I'll be one step closer to being the #1 hero." Naruto held out his fist. Izuku bumped it. Together, they took their first step onto the grounds of UA High, their shared journey about to truly begin. The entrance to UA High wasn't just a gate, it was a statement. A colossal archway of polished steel and gleaming glass that seemed to pierce the morning sky, bearing the iconic UA emblem like a hero's insignia. It was a monument to hope, a promise of greatness, and to Izuku Midoriya, it was the most terrifying thing he had ever seen. Every step he took felt like he was walking on eggshells. The power of One for All, a gift he had bled for over 10 agonizing months, was a slumbering leviathan in his bones. It didn't hum with energy as he'd imagined. It felt more like an overpressurized tank, a single crack away from a catastrophic explosion. He hadn't had a single day to practice with it, not even a test swing. His first time using the most powerful quirk in history would be during the most important exam of his life. He was so lost in his spiraling panic that he didn't see the slight crack in the pavement. His foot caught, and for a horrifying moment, the world tilted. He was going to fall. He was going to begin his UA journey by face planting in front of hundreds of other applicants. It was a perfect, pathetic metaphor for his life, but he didn't hit the ground. He just stopped, floating an inch above the concrete. "Whoa, you okay there?" a bright, cheerful voice asked. Izuku looked over his shoulder to see a girl with a round, kind face and a permanent blush on her cheeks. Her brown hair was cut into a neat bob. She was holding her hand out, her pinky finger raised, and he realized with a jolt that he was weightless. "Sorry for using my quirk on you without asking," she said, tapping her fingers together. "But it's a bad omen to trip and fall, right? Gotta avoid that." With a gentle touch, she released him, and his feet settled back on the ground. "Well, good luck. I'm super nervous, but let's both do our best." She gave him a brilliant smile before scurrying off into the crowd. Izuku stood there, frozen, his face the color of a ripe tomato. "Hey girl, talk to me," he stammered. A hand clapped him hard on the back, nearly sending him sprawling again. "See, Izuku? You're already making friends." Naruto grinned, his own excitement practically a visible aura. He was bouncing on the balls of his feet, his blue eyes wide as he took in the sheer scale of the academy. "This place is huge. Can you imagine the training grounds? I bet they have whole forests and lakes and stuff. I'm so pumped, I think I could fight a whole army right now, believe it." Where Izuku saw a crucible of potential failure, Naruto saw the world's greatest playground. His energy was infectious, and it managed to pull Izuku from the depths of his own anxiety. They made their way into the massive orientation auditorium, finding seats in the vast, tiered amphitheater. The air was thick with the nervous energy of 1,000 ambitious teenagers. Suddenly, the lights dimmed and a massive spotlight hit the stage. "What's up, UA applicants? Welcome to the show!" a voice screamed, amplified to the point of distortion. On stage stood the pro-hero, Present Mike. He was a whirlwind of leather, blonde hair sculpted into a giant horn, and a directional speaker quirk that could level a building. "Can I get a he?" The auditorium was met with dead silence. Izuku, a lifelong hero fanboy, began to mutter under his breath. "Wow, Present Mike, his quirk is voice. He can amplify his vocal cords to create high-frequency sound waves. It's incredibly powerful but requires fine control to avoid deafening his allies. In a closed space like this, he's probably only using 0.1% of his power." "Shut up," a familiar, gravelly voice growled from the seat next to him. Katsuki Bakugo was glaring at him, his red eyes promising murder. Izuku squeaked and shrank in his seat. "Keep an it quiet, huh? Tough crowd." Present Mike continued unfazed. "Alright, let's get to the main event. Here's the deal with your practical exam. You'll be out in one of our super huge mock urban battlegrounds. Gird your loins, 'cause you're going up against villains." A screen behind him lit up, showing pixelated images of 3 different types of robots. "There are 3 types of faux villains. Each is worth a different point value. Your goal is to use your quirks and your ninjutsu to immobilize them and rack up a heroic score." Naruto leaned over to Izuku. "Robots? Sweet. I'm great at smashing things, but what about sabotage or non-combat skills?" Izuku whispered back. "A pure combat test seems too straightforward for you, Dada." As if on cue, a tall, well-built boy with glasses and meticulously neat dark hair stood up from a few rows down. He raised his hand, ramrod straight. "Excuse me, sir. I have a question." "Hit me with it." Examinee 7111. "On the printout you've provided, there are clearly 4 types of villains listed. If this is an error, it is a gross oversight for an institution as prestigious as UA High," he declared, his voice ringing with officious indignation. He then turned and pointed a rigid finger directly at the brothers. "And you, with the wild blonde hair, you have been muttering and fidgeting this entire time. If you are not going to take this seriously, then you should leave." Naruto scowled. "Hey! I'm taking this super seriously, you 4-eyed jerk. Settle down, settle down." Present Mike intervened. "Excellent question, listener. The 4th villain type is the zero-pointer. Think of it as a stage gimmick. A gigantic obstacle to be avoided. It's worth 0 points, so there's no reason to fight it. Just run." The boy in glasses bowed stiffly. Thank you for the clarification. My apologies for the interruption. He sat down, leaving a fuming Naruto and a mortified Izuku in his wake. Alright, that's all from me. I'll leave you with our school motto. President Mike struck a heroic pose. Go beyond. Plus ultra. Good luck, everyone. Izuku found himself standing before the towering gates of Battle Center B. The other applicants were stretching, powering up, or psyching themselves out. He saw the kind girl from the entrance, and his stomach did a nervous flip-flop. The boy with the glasses was there too, doing meticulous lunges. Naruto, who had been assigned to the same battle center, bounced on his heels next to him. Okay, so the plan is to stick together, right? You find the weak spots, and I'll bring the smash. Izuku nodded, grateful. Right. Together. But the moment the massive doors slid open, any notion of a plan was obliterated. Go! 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 There's no countdown in a real fight. President Mick's voice blared from hidden speakers. The crowd surged forward like a tidal wave. Izuku was immediately swept up, jostled, and separated from Naruto in the chaotic stampede. He stumbled into the mock city, a sprawling metropolis of concrete and steel, and found himself utterly alone. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through him. He looked around wildly. Other students were already engaging the enemy. A boy with a laser naval beam blasted a one-pointer to scrap. A girl with vine-like hair ensnared two two-pointers at once. The air filled with the sounds of explosions, crackling energy, and tearing metal. Points were being scored. And he was just standing there. Okay, calm down, Izuku. You have a plan. You have one for all. He spotted a one-pointer rolling down the street. This was it. His chance. He reared back his fist, trying to draw on the power he'd inherited. He focused, trying to feel the thrumming energy, the thunderstorm in his veins. But all he could picture was All Might's warning. Your limbs would blow right off your body. His mind conjured a horrifyingly vivid image of his arm, his precious, irreplaceable arm, exploding into a red mist of gore and bone fragments. He flinched, his punch dying before it was even thrown. The robot rolled past him, completely ignoring the petrified boy. No, 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 that's not right, he stammered to himself, his breathing growing ragged. Control it. Just a little. A tiny bit. Like All Might said, squeeze the butt cheeks. He saw another robot, a two-pointer this time, menacing another student. He ran towards it, his heart pounding. Okay, this time for sure. Just 5%. But how much was 5% of a hurricane? He had no gauge, no practice. It was like trying to measure a cup of water from a broken fire hydrant. Fear paralyzed him again. He skidded to a halt, watching as the other student dispatched the robot with a powerful quirk that let them harden their skin. Another opportunity gone. Minutes ticked by. The sounds of combat began to thin as the students spread out, hunting down the last of the easily accessible points. And Izuku Midoriya, the chosen successor of the symbol of peace, had a grand total of 0 points. Despair began to claw at his throat. I'm failing. After all that work. After everything Mom, Naruto, and All Might did for me. I'm going to fail. I'm still just a useless Deku. Miles away, in a different sector of the same sprawling city, Naruto was a whirlwind of orange chaos. He had been separated from Izuku, and his initial plan had gone out the window. His new plan was simple: find robots, smash robots. He rounded a corner, and came face to face with a three-pointer. It was a lumbering, heavily armored beast with multiple cannon-like arms. Alright, you big tin can. You're first. Naruto yelled, flashing through a series of hand signs. Shadow Clone Jutsu. Poof! Poof! 2 solid clones appeared beside him. A V formation. It was one of the first things Kakashi had drilled into him after he'd mastered tree walking. Alright guys, let's go. The original Naruto yelled. The 3 Narutos charged. The robot's sensors locked on, and it fired a volley of high-pressure air cannons. One of the clones took a direct hit, and vanished in a puff of smoke. The other one zigzagged, leaping onto a car and then onto the robot's back, trying to pry open a maintenance panel. The real Naruto charged head-on. He poured chakra into the palm of his hand, trying to replicate the swirling motion his father had perfected. An unstable, violent ball of blue energy began to form, looking less like a sphere and more like a miniature, chaotic typhoon. He got within feet of the robot and thrust his hand forward. "Rasengan!" he screamed. The ball of energy dissipated a foot from the robot's chassis, the backlash sending a painful jolt up his arm and scorching his jumpsuit. Ack! Dang it! Still not stable enough. The robot swatted his clone off its back and turned its attention to him. Naruto, his primary offensive move a failure, defaulted to what he knew best: unpredictable, scrappy taijutsu. He slid under a sweeping metal arm, using his chakra-enhanced agility to jump onto its leg. He scrambled up its body, kunai in hand, and jammed it into a hydraulic joint in its shoulder. The arm seized up with a screech of protesting metal. It wasn't a kill shot, but it was an opening. He saw another examinee, a girl who could generate powerful sonic waves from her hands, cowering behind a bus stop. She was clearly terrified of the three-pointer. "Hey! Earphone girl! Hit it now!" Naruto yelled, hanging off the robot's head. The girl, startled into action, unleashed a focused sonic blast that hit the robot square in the chest, causing its internal mechanisms to rattle and short-circuit. It froze, then collapsed with a deafening crash. Naruto landed nimbly on the ground. The girl gave him a shaky thumbs up. He had weakened it, but she had dealt the final blow. She got the points. He got a sore arm and a few scrapes. This became the pattern for Naruto's exam. He was a force of chaos and disruption, but not an efficient point scorer. His taijutsu could dent the robots, but not destroy them. His basic ninjutsu, like paper bombs and kunai, were mostly useless against reinforced steel. His shadow clones were perfect for distractions and creating openings, but they lacked the power to finish the job. He managed to take down a few one-pointers by himself, mostly by toppling them or jamming their treads, but his point total was dangerously low. More often than not, he found himself instinctively helping others. He tackled a boy with the tail out of the way of a falling piece of debris. He created a half-dozen shadow clones to swarm a two-pointer that had cornered a student with a non-combat quirk, allowing them to escape. He was being a hero, but he wasn't playing the game. And in the UA entrance exam, playing the game was everything. Just a few more points, he thought, panting as he surveyed the street. "Come on, where are you, you stupid robots?" With less than 2 minutes remaining, Izuku was in a full-blown panic. His score was still a fat, mocking 0. He was a failure. The weight of it was crushing him, a physical pressure in his chest that made it hard to breathe. He was going to let All Might down. He was going to let Naruto down. He was going to let himself down. And then, the ground began to shake. It started as a low rumble, a vibration he felt in the soles of his shoes. Then it grew, a deep, grinding tremor that rattled the windows of the empty skyscrapers. A massive shadow fell over the street, eclipsing the sun. From behind a block of buildings it rose. The zero-pointer. It was impossibly, apocalyptically huge. Taller than the tallest buildings, a green, mechanical behemoth on a single, massive tread. Its arms could crush a city bus like a soda can. It was less a robot and more a walking natural disaster. "That's the zero-pointer," someone whispered in awe and terror. The collective will of the examinees broke. A wave of pure, primal fear washed over the battle center. Everyone turned and ran. "Just run!" Present Mix advice echoed in their minds. "It's just an obstacle." Izuku, caught in the stampede, was running too. It was the logical thing to do. There was no merit in fighting it. It was a force to be fled, not faced. He ran, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs, his mind screaming at his own powerlessness. Then he heard it. A small, pained cry. "Ow!" He stopped, turning against the tide of fleeing students. There, in the path of the approaching mechanical titan, was the kind, brown-haired girl from the entrance. Her leg was pinned under a large chunk of concrete, a piece of collateral damage from the zero-pointer's emergence. She was trapped. The other students ran past her, their own survival their only priority. No one stopped. No one helped. Izuku's world narrowed to that single, terrifying image: the girl, helpless and small, and the giant robot, a descending shadow of certain death. Something inside him broke. It wasn't a conscious thought. It wasn't a plan. It was an instinct buried deeper than fear, more fundamental than self-preservation. All Might's words echoed from a distant memory. Their bodies moved before they had a chance to think. His 10 months of hellish training. His brother's unwavering belief. All Might's impossible gift. It all converged into a single, explosive moment of clarity. His legs, the same legs that had hauled tons of garbage, coiled like springs. He felt one for all surge, not as a terrifying, uncontrollable flood, but as a direct extension of his will. The fear of his limbs exploding was still there, but it was a distant whisper, drowned out by the roar of his need to save her. Green, lightning-like energy crackled around him. He pushed off the ground, and the pavement cratered beneath his feet. He wasn't running. He was flying. He shot into the air, a green comet ascending towards the heavens, straight at the face of the mechanical god. He saw the robot's head turning, its massive optical sensor locking onto the insignificant speck soaring towards it. He reared back his fist, the one that had failed him all day. This time, he poured everything into it. 100% of the power of 8 generations of heroes, a supernova of cultivated strength, focused into a single point in his knuckles. Smash! His fist connected with the robot's faceplate. The sound wasn't just a crash. It was a physical event. A concussive boom that shattered every window for 3 city blocks. The metal of the zero-pointer's head didn't just dent. It warped, buckled, and imploded, a wave of destruction radiating out from the point of impact. Izuku hung in the air for a single, breathtaking moment, silhouetted against the exploding head of the monster he had just slain. Then, the price came due. An agony beyond description shot up his arm. He looked down and saw that his right arm was a shattered, mangled ruin, bent at impossible angles, the skin a grotesque purple. The recoil had been just as devastating as the punch. At the same time, the force of his initial jump had shattered both his legs. They were just dead weight now, useless appendages. The power receded, leaving him a broken, powerless boy 100 feet in there, with nothing but gravity below him. He was falling. I did it, was his last coherent thought. But I'm going to die. Naruto had felt the tremor from 3 streets over. He, like everyone else, had looked up in awe at the zero-pointer. His first instinct was pure, unadulterated excitement. Now that's a real opponent. But then he remembered he was low on points and running out of time. He turned to look for a smaller, more manageable target when he saw it. A small, green and black speck, arcing through the sky like a misfired firework. He knew instantly. There was only one person he knew with that much reckless, self-destructive heroism. Izuku! He screamed, his voice raw with terror. He watched, his heart frozen in his chest, as his brother, his small, once powerless little brother, delivered a punch that defied reality itself. He saw the giant robot's head explode. He saw the impossible power. And then, he saw Izuku begin to fall, a broken puppet tumbling from the sky. Time seemed to slow to a crawl. The cheers of the other students faded into a dull roar. The only thing that mattered was the falling figure. His brother was going to hit the pavement. He was going to die. A searing, white-hot panic, hotter and more potent than any anger he had ever felt, erupted from the seal in his gut. It wasn't the slow, malevolent leak of the QB's hatred. It was a desperate, panic surge of pure power, answering its host's desperate need. Naruto didn't think about hand signs. He didn't think about chakra control. He just acted. Shadow Clone Jutsu. He roared, his voice cracking with a primal scream of desperation. It wasn't 2 clones that appeared. It wasn't even a dozen. A massive, churning cloud of smoke erupted from his position, blanketing the entire street. When it cleared, there were dozens of Narutos. 40, 50, maybe more. They weren't perfect combat clones. Some were a little transparent, some were slightly misshapen, but they were solid. Save him! The original Naruto screamed, pointing a trembling finger at the sky. The command was instinctual, a hive-mind reaction. The army of orange-clad clones scrambled, a chaotic, uncoordinated mess of pure desperation. They climbed on top of each other, forming a clumsy, living pyramid. Others linked arms, trying to form a crude safety net. It was the ugliest, most inefficient, most beautiful jutsu ever performed. Izuku fell into the tangled mass of his brother's clones. The impact was still immense, but it was distributed, softened. The clones took the brunt of the force, each one dissipating into a puff of smoke as they absorbed a fraction of the kinetic energy. It was like falling into a cloud that screamed, "Believe it!" On impact, the last clone, the one at the very bottom of the pile, caught Izuku's head just before it hit the concrete. It looked up at the original, gave a shaky thumbs up, and then poof, it was gone. A wave of dissipating smoke and spent energy washed over the street. When it cleared, Izuku was lying unconscious on the ground, his limbs horribly broken, but he was alive. Standing over him, panting and swaying from the massive chakra expenditure, was a single, exhausted Naruto Uzumaki. A deafening silence fell over Battle Center B. The other applicants, who had been running for their lives moments before, were now staring. They weren't looking at the smoldering, decapitated remains of the zero-pointer. They were looking at the two brothers. The boy who had arrived quirkless had just demonstrated power on a godlike scale. The boy everyone dismissed as a talentless loudmouth had just performed a Kage-level jutsu to save his brother's life. The air horn blared, signaling the end of the exam. But no one moved. They just stared at the unconscious boy and his fiercely protective, exhausted brother. The pity and scorn they had once felt for them was gone, replaced by a new, potent cocktail of awe, confusion, and fear. Naruto fell to his knees beside Izuku, the adrenaline finally leaving him. He gently touched his brother's uninjured arm. "You idiot," he whispered, tears mixing with the sweat on his whisker-marked cheeks. "You magnificent, reckless idiot." The sound of soft footsteps approached. An old, diminutive woman in a hero costume, with her hair in a tight bun and a giant syringe-shaped cane, hobbled over to them. It was the youthful heroine, Recovery Girl. She looked at Izuku's mangled limbs and let out a long-suffering sigh. "Oh dear. It's always the self-sacrificial ones who break themselves the most." She leaned down and planted a soft kiss on Izuku's forehead. A faint green glow enveloped him, and the most severe of his injuries began to mend, though he remained unconscious. She then looked at Naruto, who was watching her with wary eyes. "And you, dearie? You used enough chakra to put a full-fledged jonin in a coma for a week. You're both a matched set of trouble, aren't you?" Naruto didn't answer. He just watched as a medical team carefully loaded his brother onto a stretcher. His mind was a whirlwind. Izuku had done it. He had shown the world his power, and Naruto had been there to catch him. But was it enough? Izuku had 0 villain points. And Naruto's own score was pathetically low. They had created a miracle. They had performed a legend. But had they passed the test? As he watched them carry his brother away, Naruto was terrifyingly unsure.